Warning, this podcast contains violence, sexuality, gore, and other horrible and disturbing things. Listener discretion is advised. Also, the hosts of this venture are ignorant dipshits, so please do not take anything they say as fact. And enjoy the show.
Now, are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then we'll begin.
Today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be.
It is our basic human right to be fucked up.
A second plane now has crashed into the other tower of the World Trade Center.
Putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
The defendant shall be incarcerated for the rest of her natural life with no possibility of parole.
You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men.
We were somewhere around Barstow, on the edge of the desert, when the drugs began to take hold.
Hello, and welcome once again to Occulte Veritatis podcast. I'm Ood Gallifrey, and in, not studio, but in distance with me,
Mary,
Richard Bigley,
and the haunting force behind our electronic might.
I'm the soundboard demon, or in this case, just the internet demon, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. I think since we've given you access to Twitter, you've been all over the place.
I really like that Twitter thing. You guys are so stupid, but it's great.
Yeah, I can't argue with you there. So today we're going to be covering false confessions. This is something that I've wanted to cover for a while because even a lot of progressive people have like a big problem with accepting the idea that not only do false confessions occur, they occur frequently, and the very way that we set up our legal system and the way that we interrogate people generates false confessions on a regular basis. But before we go into that, let's go into some poison.
So, what's your poison?
Okay, well, I am having ice cream. Last week, I made a Diet Coke ice cream with like a little bit of dash of vanilla and some Diet Coke. It's pretty good. I like it. In retrospect, I think I might have wanted to boil out some of the I guess, water out of the Diet Coke. So I think maybe I would have gone with like 2 cans of Diet Coke and just kind of like boiled it down to like being like a cup of Diet Coke instead, because it's not all that cokey tasting. And I'm also thinking I might have like, I don't know, it feels very like melty ice kind of thing as opposed to like ice creamy. But I mean, it's all right. It's got a dash of vanilla to it. I threw a bunch of sugar in there as well, which kind of does defeat the Diet Coke thing. So I'm thinking in the future I might want to include like, use like erythritol or xylitol or something. But I don't know. It's all right. It's cold. Tastes like Diet Coke. Has a bit of caffeine in it. It's good.
Sounds amazing.
Oh, I mean, they can just call me Ben and Jerry, I guess,
I love it.
Good old BJ.
Well, for my poison, my husband, Mr. Sage Murray, has brought me down some spaghetti squash. Oh, he brought me down more. And it has some fake vegetarian Italian sausage and tomato sauce and mozzarella cheese, and it's got like all this Italian seasoning. Pardon? It has homemade tomato sauce in it. I was just informed, and it's very fucking good. This is my second bowl, and it is amazing.
Somebody touching my spaghetti squash.
And it's amazing. It's unreal. I'm very spoiled. 10 out of 10.
Fuck yeah, 10 out of 10. Yeah, good job, Mr. Sage Murray. I'm drinking Gingerade Monster Mule. Not only am I addicted to this energy drink, everybody in the household is. And we've kind of been cock teased because a couple times it seems like Monster Mule, this flavor of Monster, has been like discontinued. Yeah, everybody in the house loves it. So whenever we find it, we buy a couple pallets and like drink it way too quickly. But like, I hope they make this a regular flavor because honestly, I really like it. Like I said, everybody in the house loves this flavor. It's like a virgin cocktail that has a bunch of caffeine in it.
A Moscow Mule?
Yeah, exactly.
I love Moscow Mules.
Now, I know that Monster's a satanic organization. I saw a video on Facebook from a lady that said that the Monster symbol is actually 666. But, you know, I'm going to risk it for this. It tastes pretty good.
Look at your M closely. There's a gap right here in the letter M. It's never connected. So you go into Hebrew. The letter Vav is also the number 6. Short top, long tail. Short top, long tail. You could have here in Hebrew 666 on the can.
That's not the most wrong thing I've ever heard, but like if you're gonna worship Satan, there's so much more fun ways to do it than drinking sugary beverages. I mean, just getting naked and screaming at the neighbors at the top of your lungs until something happens, like that's way more fun than just like, sugar and whatever the shit is in here.
Oh shit, I was worshiping Satan. I didn't even know it.
10 out of 10.
Yeah, I think I gave mine a 10 out of 10 too.
8 out of 10 for mine.
We're ending off the night. Maybe we're employing like comfort beverages and food, like in reaction. We just recorded Unit 731. It's probably going to be on the feed before this one is, so maybe you understand.
Yeah, that one was rough.
Comfort beverage. Like a small house made of semen. Comfort beverage.
Boo.
So, the first question I want to ask you, do you think that you guys would confess to a crime you didn't commit?
If I were to ask the average person, would you ever confess to a crime you did not commit? Everybody would say no. What I want to talk about actually is what I think is one of the most counterintuitive aspects of human behavior, and that is the tendency for people to give confessions to crimes they did not commit. I have been investigating this topic for many years now, and I find that people actually intuitively have a better grasp on why somebody might kill themselves and commit suicide than understand why somebody might confess to a crime they did not commit. You would think, in terms of how common it is, that it almost never happens. When I first got involved in false confession, in the study of false confessions, it was my sense that I was studying a fascinating aspect of social influence, but not an aspect of social influence that was common. The more I see and the more data that have come out, the more we come to realize that people often confess to crimes they did not commit. First, it's important to recognize, I think, that very often false confessions occur voluntarily. That is, somebody who has not committed the crime steps forward without police pressure, without police influence, and confesses to something they didn't do. There's a long history of cases just like that. I years ago called these voluntary false confessions. But then when it comes down to looking at vulnerability in the police interrogation setting, it is absolutely clear from the wrongful conviction data, from laboratory experiments, from self-report studies, that juveniles are particularly vulnerable. They are disproportionately represented in the population of false confessors. That people with intellectual impairments, the mentally retarded, for example, are disproportionately represented in the population of false confessors. And people with various types of mental illness appear, again, in those numbers with large frequency. It is clear that whether because these populations are naive, whether they are suggestible, whether they are overly compliant, whatever that issue may be, it is clear that in the police interrogation setting where influence is the issue, they are more subject to influence and manipulation than the average person. It is common for people, and it would be wrong for people to assume that only the weak and vulnerable confess to crimes they didn't commit. It happens to people who are ordinary, smart, having all mental health and adults. The reason it happens is now it gets down to a story about police interrogation tactics. In the United States, police are allowed to lie about evidence. Police are allowed to turn to a suspect who has for hours denied any involvement and to say to that suspect, you've denied your involvement and yet we have your fingerprints on the murder weapon. Or we have the victim was in a struggle, we have hair in her grasp, we've done the test, the hair is yours. Or you've taken a polygraph test, a lie detector test, and you've failed it. Or you've been identified by a witness. Or we have your fingerprints, or your blood, or your DNA, or what have you. In these cases, we see a number of these cases where the suspect starts to get confused and disoriented and starts to question his or her own innocence. And often the conversation then turns to questions about memory and consciousness. And there are cases on record where suspects who we now know are innocent not only confessed and signed a confession, but they concluded and inferred that they must actually have committed this crime.
The first question I want to ask you, do you think that you guys would confess to a crime you didn't commit?
I would like to say that I wouldn't, but obviously I would.
I killed a bunch of people once.
At one time, I would have said no too, but I've been through a couple of interrogations in my life. When I was a young man, I worked for a hotel, and during the night, when I was doing the night audit service and booking people into the hotel, somebody broke into the liquor store that was adjoined to the hotel. They didn't have any security camera footage, so they didn't see really who did it, but I got brought into the cop shop the next day, and I was accused while on shift of breaking into the liquor store and staging it as a robbery. And for a good 5 or 6 hours, I was pressured to admit to something I didn't do. And I felt every manipulation tactic in the book. I felt those pressures to want to admit to the crime just to get out of that room and get away from those 2 prick cops who were interviewing me. I felt those pressures. Later, when I was in the military, it got amped up a little bit more. I had a military laptop in my bag. Now, I was using it to work with a youth program, so there wasn't government secrets that could harm the nation on that computer, but it was considered a big deal if I lost it. And I left it in my car one day, and my car got broken into, and my laptop was stolen. And I got brought down to a base near where I lived, and I was interrogated by military police. And military police are even a little more aggressive than regular police, or maybe it was just the 2 that I had. And again, I didn't steal. They thought that I stole the laptop and sold it on the side. That was their theory going in, and they were trying their damnedest to make me admit to the story they thought already happened. They thought that I staged my laptop being stolen so that I could sell it for money. And they tried to pressure me to make an admittance to that degree. And I'm going to go into some of the stuff that they did, but I just want to I think that I felt the same pressures that a lot of people that falsely confess do. Have you guys ever been interviewed by police or felt those pressures from them?
I generally just don't talk to police. Even when you're in their custody, you just don't say shit. Nothing you say will
Me too.
lead to any good things for you, so you just don't talk to them.
Yeah. These days I wouldn't talk to them, and I give I think Richard's advice for anybody out there, keep your mouth shut if you're in front of cops. But when these 2 incidents happened, I didn't know any better. Just like so many other people don't know any better. I thought that the cops were there to help and that they were just doing their best to solve the crime. And honestly, I felt like I was burdening them by not admitting it. Even though I didn't do it, it was a very strange thing. So, are false confessions a problem? Yeah. The various innocent projects around the Western world. Innocence projects are these legal organizations that form. Usually, there are lawyers and people involved in the legal systems and justice systems that come together and provide funding to help get people out of jail that don't belong there. People that were imprisoned due to faulty evidence or due to an improper court procedure. And from all these various innocent projects around the world, they say that about 30% of the people that they help are in prison alone due to a false confession. And those are just the cases that they take on. Those are the ones that they actually put money and time towards to solve. Tens of thousands of requests to look into previous cases are made to Innocence Project organizations every year. So we don't really know how many false confessions are out there. A minority of the requests that are put in actually get legal help from these organizations because they're just overwhelmed with all these requests. And there's no real effort to study or evaluate these confessions. So we don't really know how many false confessions are out there, but there could be tens of thousands, there could be hundreds of thousands of people sitting innocent in a jail cell because they were pressured to falsely confess to a crime they didn't commit.
I could see it.
Before we move on to false confessions, I want you to hear an example of one. This was recorded in the 1970s. The person being interrogated is Peter Riley. He was 18 years old when he went to jail, convicted of murdering his own mother. Now, this conviction was overturned, and he was released 3 years later, after new evidence came forward. But he confessed to killing his mother after a 25-hour interrogation. Here are some snippets from it. Let it be the groundwork for the rest of the episode.
You can stop answering questions at any time. You just say, I want to go home, then you can go home. Fair enough?
Right.
Okay. And we go strictly by what we see here.
Mm-hmm.
And these charts say you hurt your mother last night.
But the thing is, I don't remember it.
The charts don't say that, Pete.
Could it be that I've totally put it out of my memory?
All right. This is our problem. Once we get this out in the open, and we get you the proper help, it'll be over with.
Mm-hmm. Would,
and as I say, no one's going to lock you up and throw the keys away.
Tell me,
you know?
Would truth serum help? I hated being home. I'd go to my friend's house for a week or 2 weeks, and then I'd miss home. And I'd go home, and I'd be there for an hour. Yeah. And I hate it all over again.
I don't think you're a vicious person.
I'm not.
Basically. But last night...
Being pushed and the tension and everything.
Right. The animal instinct took over, and you fought back to protect yourself. You see? You follow what I mean? This is the whole thing. Can you remember stomping her leg?
I think. But I'm not sure, because you say it, and then I imagine that I'm doing it.
No. You're not imagining anything. I think the truth is starting to come out from you now. Because you want it out. You want that second chance.
I think I did. Don't be afraid to say I did. Yeah, but I'm incriminating myself. I think I did. We have right now, without any word out of your mouth, proof positive that I did it. You did. So, okay. Then I may as well say I did. Sure. Okay. Should I really come out and say something that I'm not sure of?
Peter, I think you're sure of it.
Pete, you're sure of it. I know I'm not. I mean, I'm sure of what you've shown me that I did it. But what I'm not sure of is how I did it. It's still not all coming to me, Pete. Everything that I've been saying, it's just almost like I'm making it up. Okay, now listen, you've been playing head games with us. I'm not playing head games. You've been playing head games with us now for too long a period. And if you want to play this way, we'll take you and we'll lock you up and we'll treat you like an animal. If that's what you want.
At 11 p.m., after an interrogation that stretched over 25 hours, the police had Peter Riley's confession. The tape recorder was turned off. One of the officers had written out a full statement for Riley to sign. The teenager signed it.
So there are three basic kinds of false confessions, and often they don't stick directly to one of these categories. Sometimes there's a little bit of one, a little bit of another, but these are the basic three categories. Number one, voluntary false confessions are confessions where the individual feels pressure from forces or people outside of law enforcement entities. This includes any internal pressure put on them by themselves. A whole bunch of people, I forget the number right now, but a large amount of people, like more than 10, admitted to the kidnapping of the Lindbergh baby. When the Lindbergh baby was kidnapped, multiple people came forward saying, yep, I'm the guy that did it. I'm the perpetrator, because they wanted notoriety. They wanted attention. Their voluntary confession came from an internal place. Now, sometimes it's due to a psychological or psychiatric disorder where they feel pressured to admit to things. They feel like some undue guilt, even though they didn't do it, that they must come forward. Some people, like I've said before, Lindbergh baby situation, sometimes they come out for notoriety or attention, or because they desire to punish themselves, or sometimes because they are genuinely out of touch with reality and truly believe that they did it. And they're not pressured to admit, but they are so out of touch that they admit it. Sometimes voluntary confessions can also arise from completely rational motives. There's been a bunch of cases where, say, a young son kills their sibling by accident or on purpose, or, a child kills another child, and oftentimes one of the parents will falsely confess to the murder to protect the child. That's happened a lot of times. Now, for these voluntary confessions, interestingly enough, police and law enforcement agencies, they aren't stringent, they aren't strict about it, but they're better about catching these voluntary false confessions than the ones that they pressure themselves. Now, it's kind of funny because these voluntary confessions, in a way, are a bit truer than the confessions that were made by police pressuring people. Like, at least these false confessions are generated from like an internal place. Like, one guy came up with the idea of falsely confessing to things without being pressured by police.
Right.
But it seems that the police are kind of blind to their own ability to pressure people. So if somebody comes in off the street and admits to something, police are much more apt to be skeptical of that than a confession that they generated themselves with pressure. Number 2 is persuaded confessions, also known as internalized confessions. These occur when interrogation tactics cause a suspect to doubt their memory, and they become genuinely persuaded, whether temporarily or permanently, that they have committed the crime, despite having no memory of committing it. So this is where police apply the gear. They apply the pressure for people to admit, and sometimes it generates false confessions. That's where these persuaded false confessions come about. They tend to result from long and intense interrogations. These interrogations can include repeated accusations that the suspect committed the crime. When I was being interrogated, I was told multiple times in both scenarios that I did this and I should just buck up and grow up and admit to it, or else I'm like those kind of things were repeated to me over and over again. Adamant discrediting of the suspect's denials, like saying that the denial is contradicted by known facts. And these facts don't have to be real. Cops can make up these quote-unquote facts on the spot. Cops are allowed to lie to people they're interviewing in order to pressure them to admit. So sometimes they bring up like false evidence. Like when I had my laptop stolen and I was being interviewed by the military police, they said that they found an account on Kijiji with my name on it that had the laptop on it. Now, I don't think the person that broke into my car knew who I was, so I kind of sniffed that out to be bullshit right away. Like, what do you mean somebody put my name on a Kijiji ad to sell the laptop that they stole from me? Isn't that strange? But they were insisting, and so I felt that kind of exact pressure. Fabrications of evidence of guilt, like saying that an eyewitness said that the suspect committed a crime when no such eyewitness exists. You'll see this in a lot of not necessarily interrogation videos, but also interrogation videos, but sometimes just videos of police rolling up on people. You'll see that line and line again. Yeah, we got a few calls about you. Yeah, we got a few calls about you. Yeah, a few people called in about you. Like, police are allowed to come up with it on the spot to present that idea that, like, yeah, there's evidence against you that we have, whether it be true or not.
Isn't that illegal in some? I'm pretty sure in the UK it's illegal for police to lie about that kind of stuff. I know it's not here in America.
I'm sure police are allowed to lie pretty much everywhere. It's part of, I guess, cops having to do cop work, like if you're undercover but you can't lie, it's kind of hard,
Well, I thought it was I thought it was illegal for them to lie, like that situation, like not undercover, obviously, but like they couldn't be like, yeah, well, we have all this evidence about you, even when they don't. I don't know.
In almost every country on earth with law enforcement are allowed to lie to you to some degree. Now, sometimes they're not allowed to lie to you about specific things. Like, I'll go into it a little bit before I get into the main part, but like, for example, they're not allowed to promise like concrete things. Like, they can't say like, we will get a year off your sentence if you admit to this right now. Like, they can't say that, but they can imply like a motherfucker. That's perfectly legal, and it's been defended in Supreme Court. And in many places, including Canada, including America, it's been defended in courts and held up in court when a cop lied in the interrogation room that led to a confession. If the cop said something like, we found your hair at the scene and tested its DNA and found out it was you, and there's no way it's anybody else. Like, that's been done in the interrogation room in Canada and America and has been upheld in court. There are restrictions, and certain police departments, certain attorneys, certain judges won't put up with that, but It's not numerous enough or popular enough or upheld enough or constantly fought against enough in order to make like a reasonable enough change to fight against these coercion tactics that the police can use. And police in a lot of areas are very free to lie and imply and lie by omission or just directly lie to pressure people into admitting things. Yeah, studies have shown that we may be more susceptible to making a persuaded false confession, that's one pressured by the police, than we realize. There's a leading researcher in false confessions with the last name Casson, and he started out as just a psychological researcher, and he started getting involved in interrogations. And soon after studying interrogations, he realized there's a big fucking problem on the horizon. He started testing people to see how willing they were to lie about stuff they didn't do. And through his experiments, he found that so many people, the majority of people, were willing to falsely confess to things, like under little to no pressure. He conducted an experiment where he had students typing on keyboards. He told the students beforehand that the system had a glitch, and he said, don't hit the Alt key, because if you hit the Alt key, the computer will crash and it'll ruin the experiment. In reality, the Alt key was programmed to do diddly squat. It didn't do anything, but he just had a timer in the computer that would simulate a crash. And like they weren't pressing the Alt key to make it crash. It just crashed on their own. Afterwards, he interviewed them. And using the same techniques that police do that I mentioned before, repeated accusations that they committed the crime, discrediting denials, fabrication of guilt and evidence, a bunch of the students started to admit to pressing the Alt key when they didn't.
That's wild.
Some of the students went far enough to fabricate reasons, like they were confused by the process, or, oh, the side of my hand slipped, I'm sorry. Like, even though they knew that they didn't press it, they were already making up stories to justify their false confession and going along with it. And this was in a very low pressure scenario. He didn't have these people cornered in a room. It was a very light touch. He applied these interrogation tactics in a light way, in a non-confrontational way. So even without that great pressure, just using a little bit of these tactics, he's able to get all these college students to admit to something they didn't do.
That's pretty terrifying. I could see it working on me too. Easy peasy.
Oh yeah, like both those situations I was in, like first time I was interrogated for around 6 hours, second time was around 4 hours. Like if they would have pressed the gear and interrogated me longer, I think I may have broken. Like I'm not a steel fortress of will. Like I have a breaking point like anybody else, and I think they may have gotten me to. I may be sitting in a jail cell today for some bullshit about stealing a military computer. You know?
Listen to me. I'm going to tell you what happened, okay? We got a call from a neighbor about somebody discharging a firearm, okay?
Yeah.
From that point on, this nosy neighbor, or whatever we're going to call him, has monitored, and I'm not going to tell you how, okay? Just think about it. With today's technology, monitored what was going on in front of this residence that they were calling to complain about until police arrived. This witness, this complainant, the person that called police, is documenting what is going on. Okay? He's documenting. Do you understand what I'm trying to tell you?
That they're pointing the finger at me?
No, forget that. They're documenting the fact of whatever's going on in front of the house. Just with a camera, with a cell phone, you can record shit nowadays. Again, after the person calls police, he begins to document, maybe film, what's going on in front of this house. So it's one of the easiest investigations I've had. It's fucking there. And you can't lie about that, bro. I'm giving you an opportunity.
I'm not lying.
Listen to me. I'm giving you
an opportunity.
Listen to me.
Shoot that gun.
Listen to. But when you're telling me that you didn't have that firearm in your hand, we can prove otherwise. We can prove otherwise. I can prove it. I can go in front of the judge and say, hey, look, bro, you want us to play this video? You want us to show you the fingerprint results? You want us to show you the GRE test on this gentleman?
I did not have that firearm in my hand.
Huh? Is there any reason why your fingerprints are going to be on there?
They're not going to be on there.
Any reason why we got an eyewitness to you shooting that gun? Can you explain to my partner and I why that you were positively identified as the person who shot that gun?
It's a misconception. That's a lie. I did not shoot that gun. I did not have a firearm in my hand.
We can prove that. We're beyond that point, buddy. We're beyond that, man. And based on our investigation and the trajectory and stuff like that, we sort of believe that it probably.
I did not have that firearm in my hand at all.
It could have been a fucking accident. It could have been an accidental discharge. Okay, but when you're completely denying that, then I gotta think another way, bro. Because,
dude, it's the truth. I didn't have that firearm in my hand whatsoever.
Well, you're not. Maybe you're not listening to what I'm saying. This person that complained and called initially, document was recording shit, dude. I'm trying to find out intent because a camera doesn't tell me what intention your brain
There's
has.
no intention.
Or Richard.
Richard didn't want to kill the cop. He was shooting the ground. I'm not going to have some son of a bitch across the road sit there telling you guys that I was the one pulling the trigger on.
You're not the only. That's not the only person, unfortunately. Remember, you're the last one that we spoke to at this point. There's more people than just the nosy neighbor that called the police, bro. There's people you live with. There's people responding deputies. And you know, Woody, I've only been honest with you, bro. I've only been honest.
Yeah, and I've been honest with you.
No.
Don't roll your eyes at me like you're a fucking 5-year-old. We have an eyewitness that shows you, okay, you come outside after the 3 shots are fired, watches you take a level platform, one hand, boom, and shoots across the top of those bushes. We're going to process that fucking gun, and you know what it's going to tell us? Your prints are on that gun. Now, when we present all this shit to the fucking judge, and your lawyer's going, yeah, dude, maybe you shouldn't have fucked with these detectives.
I'm not fucking with you. I didn't touch that gun whatsoever.
You did?
I know what I did.
You?
I know what I did. I drank beer and watched freaking Richard shoot the shit in the ground.
Right. Okay. And after
that
happened, you went inside.
I went, woo, boom.
And you came outside and you shot another round.
I did not. I didn't do it.
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
I did not.
This is like I'm dealing with a 5-year-old, Jimmy. That's what I can't understand.
There's people saying you did. Your buddies are saying you fucking did. We got independent witnesses.
I didn't do it.
You can't tell us that you didn't fucking fire that 4th shot anymore. You can't tell us. We can prove otherwise. And if you do, the fucking judge is going to throw the fucking book at you. You fired that 4th shot, brother. We can prove it.
There was only 3 shots.
No, there's 4.
There's 4.
There's 4, bro. There's 4, dude. When the shit hits the fan, your buddies ain't going to stick up for you. Okay? Independent witnesses.
I couldn't have fired that shot.
Independent witnesses. Did you know that there was deputies already before that deputy, the one that pulled up in front of your house? There was deputies already in the corner set up, watching you. You fired the 4th shot. Now we need to know if you tried to kill that deputy or did you just discharge a firearm? And that's a misdemeanor. We need to find out. We have a good idea, but we want to hear it from you. We have a good idea what your intention was, based on the trajectory of the round. We have witnesses observing this shit, because they've already heard 3 before rounds. Okay, there's witnesses that observed it. Deputies already on the other side of the street watching you, setting up on the house. The guy has a fucking rifle trained at the front door, because he doesn't know what the fuck's going on. Well, you fired that shot, brother. Think back real hard. Think back real hard so we can at least say, you know what, the guy at the end, he came clean. We don't think he was trying to kill anybody, but yeah, that's the 4th round that's there. I'm not going to make shit up. There's 4 rounds there, bro. All your roommates know it. Richard knows it. The independent witnesses know it. And there's a fucking deputy watching you. He's watching you from down the street.
The shell casings match the bullets that are inside of the gun. We're going to show that the extraction marks that it came from that gun matched that of the shell casings that we found on scene, and we're going to put all of that together. So that means that we've got that one round that deputy witnessed you pull the trigger.
You did it. You made a mistake, dude. You discharged a firearm in public. That's a misdemeanor, brother. And we could tell you weren't trying to hit the deputy because we know the trajectory of the round.
We have an eyewitness who puts a gun in your hand. No, you don't remember up to a point. You remember the whole thing.
No, I don't.
Yes, you do.
I do not.
Yes,
Honest
you
to
do.
God, man.
Oh, no, I'm being honest to God, and so is my partner, and so is the deputy that witnessed you because he broadcast it over a radio. And we're pulling the tapes right now. We're pulling the dispatch tapes. And you know what those dispatch tapes are going to describe? You. And then we've got this one round, that one shell casing that's kind of all by itself. And that's number 4. And that's the 4th shell casing which you pulled the trigger on, which projected a bullet, came out of the end of the gun that you were holding, that a deputy witnessed from about 200 feet away, who described you holding a gun. But I'm going to tell you something. You sit here and you hold on to this story, I'm just telling you, it's not a threat. When we put all of the evidence together in a court of law, it's not going to look good, my friend. It's not going to look good.
God, like after like an hour and a half, I would be like, fuck, fine, let me go. I did it. Fuck me up.
This chair is uncomfortable. I will do whatever you say.
Yeah. Also like anxiety. Jesus.
Oh, 100%. Number 3 is compliant false confessions. This is the 3rd type. These are given to escape a stressful situation, to avoid punishment, or to promise or to gain a promised or implied reward. So, like I said, these 3 types are often mixed together. Compliant false confessions may be obtained through physical pressure. For example, torture. Now, torture isn't usually allowed in most Western countries by police.
Isn't, in quotations, allowed, in quotations, by most, in quotations, police, in quotations.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah, an ACAB and all that. And like it's not like there's cases of like old country boy like police departments like dragging somebody to a shed to give them like a more personal interrogation, and nobody knows what happens in that shed. That still happens today. And it's not only like sundown towns in the southern states. Like metropolitan police have examples of this occurring where they're brought to a more dangerous situation and quote unquote like arguably tortured to give confessions. That still happens today. Now those are still a problem. Like police should not be doing that. But even if you don't torture people, police can still use compliant false confession pressures to get somebody to admit. For example, a police interrogator may convince a subject that he'll be found guilty in court if he doesn't confess. The police did this with me. When I was accused of breaking into the liquor store, they said that if I admitted to it, I might just have to pay a fine, do some community service, and it would all be over. Like, come on, Ood. Like, we all know you did this. Like, it's going to go worse for you if you don't admit to it. You got to admit to it now. We can get you, we can help you. You can get community service instead of jail time if you just admit to it right now.
It's wild.
Even though the suspect knows that he did not commit the crime, like I did, the entire trial and evidentiary process might be so foreign and frightening to them that they believe the interrogator. And like you see this a lot in false confessions. Brendan Dassey, from Making a Murderer fame.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put a clip of him here, but a lot of the rhetoric that the police were using was stuff like, well, Brendan, you're just a young man. Like, if you admit to the murder, you can get out in your mid-30s. You can have a family. Just admit to it now, and you have a chance for a life later on. It's going to be better for you.
I know Mark has something, so I'm just going to give you an opportunity to talk to us now and kind of fill in those gaps for us.
Honesty here, Brendan, is the thing that's going to help you. Okay, no matter what you did, we can work through that. Okay, we can't make any promises, but we'll stand behind you no matter what you did. Okay? Because you're being the good guy here. You're the one that's saying, you know what, maybe I made some mistakes, but here's what I did. The other guy involved in this doesn't want to help himself. All he wants to do is blame everybody else, okay? And by you talking with us, it's helping you, okay? Because the honest person is the one that's going to get a better deal out of everything. You know how that works. You know, honesty is the only thing that'll set you free, right? And we know, like Tom said, we reviewed those tapes. We know there's some things you left out. And we know there's some things that maybe weren't quite correct that you told us, okay? We've been investigating this a long time. We pretty much know everything. That's why we're talking to you again today. We really need you to be honest this time with everything, okay? If in fact you did some things which we believe some things may have happened that you didn't want to tell us about, it's okay. As long as you be honest with us, it's okay. If you lie about it, that's going to be problems, okay? Does that sound fair? All right.
At the same time, the interrogator might try to convince the suspect that confessing will lead to a much more lenient outcome. And at this point, with all these pressures, like people being psychologically pressured and pressured with like things are going to go worse if you don't confess, and like we're going to go harder on you if you don't confess. With all these things, some people may simply falsely confess just to stop the confrontation of the interrogation. And that's what the compliant false confession is. It's basically like a pressure cooker. They basically pressure people through psychological, physical, whatever, until they confess to escape that stressful situation.
It would work on me.
Talk about stressful situations. Do you guys want to guess the average length of an interrogation? Like, they took a look at all the false confessions that have been overturned throughout the years, and they looked at the average time the people that gave those false confessions were interrogated. Do you guys want to guess how long that is?
How long? I don't want to guess.
7 minutes. I'm just going to say 7 minutes.
Most interrogations that generate false confessions average around 16 hours long.
I was close.
16 hours.
Police technically are only legally allowed to hold you for 8 hours in most Western countries. But we'll talk about later how they get around that little rule.
Yuck.
Yeah, so compliant, they confess to get out of the confrontation. Oh, and like there's another like compliant false confession, like people making like little deals with themselves to get out of the stressful situation now. Like, say that a police officer says that, oh, we have some DNA evidence that's being worked right now. Like, we tested the crime scene. We're testing the DNA right now. And if you did it, you're going to be found out. You think that a lot of people would like keep their mouths shut at that point, but some people under that stressful situation will falsely confess to the crime because they think, well, I can make a false confession right now, get out of this like horrible, like a pressured interrogation, and truly, if there's DNA evidence coming, it's going to prove me innocent because that's what DNA evidence does, right? But a lot of times the cops are lying about the DNA evidence, and by the time they get out of that room, they have a false confession on the books they can use against them.
Yuck.
So those are the three types. Let's talk about who's most vulnerable to false confessions.
Anxious people. People with mental health issues.
Oh yeah, we'll get there. The first class of people is people with a GLD, a general learning disability. That's the people who that's the medical term for people who are developmentally delayed and often have a childlike intelligence. Sometimes they're not able to perform like basic life functions, like they need a caregiver and stuff like that. But a lot of people that give false confessions have general learning disabilities. They have a childlike intelligence. And let's think about these people. If you're an adult with a childlike intelligence, you're less likely to think about long-term consequences. You're much more deferential to authority. You likely trust authority figures more, and you're more easily led by questions and pressures. Again, I'll go back to Brendan Dassey. A pattern that emerges again and again with general learning disability people is that they'll want to help the cops, because a lot of people that have childlike intelligence, they trust the police to do well. Like, they trust the police are good people. So if the police is asking them, like, who shot X, like, what happened here, all that good, like, all those questions, these people start guessing to help the cops. And they don't realize when they start guessing answers that they're not only implicating someone else, but they're implicating themselves. Because if you guess who killed somebody, I mean, that puts you at the scene because you saw it, right?
Exactly.
And you see this with Brendan Dassey. At one point during the interview, they ask him, well, who shot her in the head?
The one absolutely secret fact that nobody in the public yet knew was how Teresa Halbach died. Nobody knew that they had evidence that she had been shot in the head. If they could get Brendan to say that, then that would be dynamite.
Come on. Something with the head. Brendan?
Yeah.
What else did you guys do? Come on.
What he made you do, Brendan, we know he made you do something else.
What was it? What was it?
We have the evidence, Brendan. We just need you to be honest with us.
That he cut off her hair.
He cut off her hair? Okay, what else?
What else was done to her head?
That he punched her.
What else? It's okay. What did he make you do?
Cut her.
Cut her where?
On her throat.
You cut her throat? What else happens to her in her head?
Extremely, extremely important you tell us this. For us to believe you.
Come on, Brendan. What else?
We know, we just need you to tell us.
That's all I can remember.
All right, I'm just going to come out and ask you. Who shot her in the head?
He did.
Why didn't you tell us that?
Because I couldn't think of it.
Now you remember it?
Tell
us about that then.
I think Wiegert is the one who actually got frustrated and said, all right, I'm just going to come out and say it. Who shot her in the head? And of course the answer is he did, but by then he's blown the one piece of secret evidence that could have corroborated Brendan Dassey's story by feeding it to him himself.
We have yet to do a Stephen Avery Making a Murderer episode. That's in the pipes. That's going to be a big one because there's a lot to go over, and there's been a lot of history since then. But in terms of Brendan Dassey, I think he was maybe coerced into giving that. I'm not sure he was at the scene. Like, I think he was pressured into giving that because he wanted to help. He was guessing because the cops were asking him questions in a pressured setting.
I would buy that for sure.
Like Sage mentioned, people with mental illness. I am mentally ill. The other hosts are mentally ill. So, like I have a series, like I have some symptoms that go along with my mental illness that I think would make it harder for me in an interrogation room. And let's think about interrogation rooms. They're isolating, they're stressful, they're small, they're cramped, and often there's police between you and the door. And that can create an even more stressful situation. So a lot of mental illnesses have increased levels of impulsivity, problems with panic and panic disorders, problems dealing with stress, poor judgment can also come with that. And suddenly, when the pressure is put on and these people start to show symptoms of mental illness, police take these symptoms of mental illness as signs of deception. So you take a person that has a panic disorder or something of the like, you put them in an interrogation room, you pressure them until they start to freak out and crack, and the police take that as a sign of deception and say, well, oh, look at that innocent person wouldn't be this upset. Somebody that didn't do it wouldn't be this upset. They must have done it.
Nope, I would be that upset. I didn't do it.
Also, people who suffer addiction. People who suffer addiction are often a very targeted group and a group that gives false confessions at a regular rate. Most interrogations, as I said before, are between 2 or 3 hours long, but they get longer and longer. Like I said, most places have a legality surrounding how long a person can be held. In Canada and the US, it's around 8 hours. You can hold somebody for 8 hours. But people aren't, like, people are quote unquote allowed to leave, but they aren't really informed of that all that often. And often, quote unquote, the implication is put there that they can't leave. They're put in a room with a closed door, with cops between them and the door, and they're never told that they can leave after 8 hours. So they just think, oh, I guess I just have to stay till the end. And again in court, if they bring it up, the legal people that are representing the cops will just say, well, they didn't ask to be let out. Like, they had every opportunity to leave and they didn't take it. You know?
I wouldn't. I would stay there until I knew that they were done with me, because I don't want to make anyone mad at me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that would be my instinct as well. So like people can be held like as long as possible, can be held beyond 8 hours a lot of times because of quote unquote the implication. Now let's think about what this means for people who suffer from addiction. Alcohol withdrawal sets in after about 6 hours. Opioids, if you suffer an addiction to opioids, the withdrawal sets in after about 8 hours. Cocaine has a crash period, much like withdrawal, where users can be more susceptible to suggestion or pressure. On the other end of that, somebody who comes in high on cocaine, very loud and boisterous and stuff like that, they can be read as having signs of like being suspicious or deceptive. Benzodiazepines, withdrawal sets in 6 hours after use. Nicotine craving sets in only after hours. People seem to think of this as, oh yeah, well somebody's gonna trade a jail sentence for a fix. Don't think of it like that. Think of a person in this incredibly stressful, trapped situation, and like their withdrawal, like their craving for stuff they may be addicted to, what's the saying? Grain that breaks the camel's back, straw that breaks the camel's back. And people who suffer from addiction become much more likely to falsely confess as a consequence. Again in history, a healthcare and wellness issue becomes grounds for increased incarceration.
Right, which is super unfair.
This is very neat.
You want a Coke? Yeah. You gonna be able to pop it open, or you need me to?
I need methadone.
You need methadone?
Yeah, you guys can get me that methadone? Yeah.
I don't have any. Do you have medication for it, or a prescription for it? Or?
No.
What do you need methadone for?
Because I'm a fucking junkie, and you guys, I can't get no methadone. I'm gonna go through withdrawal here in a minute.
Where do you usually get your methadone from?
I don't get it. I get heroin.
How long you been using heroin?
Long time, buddy.
10 years? 15 years?
I hardly been alive that long. What are you trying to talk to me about here?
Talk to you about what happened last night. Look, here's the deal. Either you're in a bad set of circumstances, or you went and committed an armed robbery last night.
Yeah, right? I'm in a shitty, wrong place at the wrong time, obviously. I didn't commit no fucking armed robbery.
All right, then let's talk about this. Let's
I don't talk to the police, man.
I think it's in your best interest to.
How?
Man.
I don't talk to the police.
Here, okay.
I've been through the system, buddy. I know how it works.
I know you have.
You're
Jeff.
not my friend.
I'm not your friend.
You're trying to fucking get me. Or
I'm not trying to get you.
All you're trying to get is some fucking stupid ass fucking confession, and you're not going to get one.
Jeff, I'm not going to get a confession out of you for nothing.
Exactly, because I didn't do nothing.
I'm not trying to get a confession out of you.
Okay, I'm going to tell you, I didn't commit no armed robbery, and y'all ain't got no fucking evidence saying I did. Let me go. All you did is find me sitting in my buddy's house because my fucking buddy's dog's going ape shit. I go outside. There are cops everywhere, and they spotlight me. They say, "Come here." I say, "What's up?" They search me. They ain't find nothing. What's up?
Let me read this.
No.
Yes.
Because I'm not going to sign it.
You don't have to sign it. But let me read it for you. Okay?
I'm not signing nothing.
You don't have to sign it. Let me read it. You heard it earlier already. You've been through the system. You know it. It ain't going to change a thing. You're still sitting here. Warning as to your rights guaranteed by the Miranda decision of the Supreme Court of the United States.
You already read it to me earlier.
I know we did, but I'm going to read it to you again.
Thanks for the coat.
You're welcome. Before we ask any questions, you must understand what your rights are. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court. You have the right to talk to a lawyer for advice before we question you, and have him or her with you during questioning. If you do not approve of
One of the most targeted groups, young people, people under the age of 18. Nearly 1/3 of all false confessions are generated by people under the age of 18.
Holy fuck, if you had talked to me under the age of 18, I would tell you whatever the fuck you wanted to hear, because I did not want to get in trouble.
When
That's
I
just
worked
taking advantage, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Like, I was 18 when I got interrogated for the first time working at that hotel. Like, I was on the line. I wasn't technically a child anymore, but I was still, like, young, naive, like, ignorant to the ways of the world and all that. And like, I was in that interrogation room for 6 hours because, like, I wanted to play along. Like, I wanted to help. Like, I thought the police were on my side. Like, I thought, like, okay, this cop is mixed up. He obviously thinks, like, I'm going to help him understand, like, that it wasn't me. But I just got deeper and deeper in, you know? And, like, if I would have said the wrong thing, who knows if I'd, like, be sitting in this chair today instead of a cell, you know?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so young people, they're more deferential to authority. They're more emotionally vulnerable and volatile. And remember that emotions in the interrogation room are often read as signs of deception. Young people are also very poor at risk perception and seeing long-term consequences of actions. Like, young people will agree to a plea deal that, like, sentences them for the next 10 years. And they don't have the life experience and the perception to fully appreciate the consequences of that decision. I was a lot more short-sighted than when I was a kid. Like, it was about, like, what happened, like, in the week rather than, like, 10 years down the road, you know?
Absolutely. Yep.
And the last group I'll talk about is prisoners. Prisoners who are already under the control of the state can easily be manipulated into giving false confessions, often against other prisoners or people on the outside. Our jailing system is not a nice place to be. I know that sounds obvious to people that are from Canada and US, but, like, jails aren't like this all over the world. They are incredible, like, sources of trauma and abuse that are laid upon people that are put there. And people that are in jail are often very desperate to get out or improve their situation. So imagine being presented with an option that if you confess falsely to something you did or something that somebody else did, you can be given more access. You can be moved to a lower security prison, get a hearing moved up on the schedule, all that stuff. So prisoners are also a big source for false confessions because they're very vulnerable to being pressured because they're so desperate from being in an abusive situation.
Mm-hmm. Imagine if you had the option of maybe, like, tacking on 2 years to your sentence and lying about something and getting moved down to a lower security and getting out to see your family sooner, or serving the rest of your sentence. You'd be like, fuck yeah, take these 2 years off. I want to go down to minimum security and see my family more. I don't give a shit what you tell me to say.
100%. And I can't blame these prisoners for making that decision. Like, again, they're put in a circumstance where they need to survive. Like, often it's like a survival scenario for these people, like, from some of the situations they're escaping. And even if it's not a survival situation, also often they're escaping abuse or just trying to get a foot on their life. And the state makes it easy for them to falsely confess and possibly make their situation or other people's situations worse.
Mm-hmm. That's a whole other episode, the jail system here. It's bullshit.
Oh, yeah. There's one coming down the pipes about that eventually, because, yeah, there's a lot of problems.
Well, I got stories. I've worked in corrections, so...
Oh, I'm preaching to the fucking choir, I'm sure. So why do people falsely confess? There's a bunch of different explanations. Often they're mismatched together. Like, often there's multiple things going on at the same time that cause somebody to falsely confess. The first one is false memory syndrome. Under enough pressure, people can be convinced that they did things that they didn't actually do. A cognitive psychologist named Elizabeth Loftus gave a group of volunteers a rudimentary childhood experience. She told a story of them getting lost at a mall and being found by a kindly adult, and that kindly adult brought them back to their parents. And she repeated this story. She insisted to the subject she was testing that, yes, this happened to you in your youth. This is something that occurred when you were young. After just her repeating it twice, and again, it's not her cornering people in an interrogation room, it's her like in a friendly setting saying that this happened to you. By the second interview, 6 of the 24 test subjects had internalized the story, weaving in sensory and emotional details of their own. That means that people, given a period of time after being fed this story, will weave parts of their childhood into it, memories they have, to make that memory more real to them. So, like, not only did they get lost at a mall, they got lost at the, Briarwood Mall that was in my hometown. And, like it wasn't only a kindly stranger, it was the lady that ran the coffee stand that brought me back. Like, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
They were using something that they were, a story that didn't happen to them. They were integrating it into their memory and modifying it to make it more personal to them.
Well, and that's the thing to keep in mind, I guess, with regards to false memories, is that, like as we kind of discussed a little bit with the Neil Stonechild episode, a false memory is just as real to that individual as any other memory that they would have. So it becomes just as real to them as anything else.
I mean, if we're talking about just like brain chemistry and pathways, like the chemical signatures of memories being taken from like the memory centers in your brain and being brought forward to your conscious mind to be remembered, like those processes for a false memory and a real memory are identical, chemically identical. Two more psychological researchers, Julia Shaw and Stephen Porter, actually from the UK and Canada, went even further. So the first psychologist that studied false memories, she just did a little childhood story. These two upped the ante. They got people to admit to crimes they didn't commit. They used the same method for implanting memories, much of the same tactics that police use in interrogations to insist somebody did something. And they got 70% of all people they tested to confess to a crime they didn't commit. 70%.
That's terrifying. 70%.
Yeah, and like if they would have done the same thing in front of a police officer, like they could be in jail. But because they did it in front of psychological researchers, they didn't have to face any consequences, even though they falsely committed or confessed to a crime they didn't commit.
Mm-hmm.
There's a common lay belief that memory works like a recording device. You just record the experience and later on you play it back. But that is not the way memory actually works. Memory is actually more of a constructive process. When we remember something, we're actually taking bits and pieces of experience, bringing them together to essentially construct what feels like an actual memory. So I like to say that memory works a little bit more like a Wikipedia page, because you can go in there and edit it, but so can other people. If you ask somebody, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? You're going to get a higher estimate of speed on the average than if you ask a question with a more neutral verb like hit. How fast were the cars going when they hit each other? The early questions could affect the answer that people gave to some totally different question that you put to them often much later. So if I ask you how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other, later on you're more likely to tell me you saw broken glass at the scene, even though there wasn't any broken glass. These leading questions, they contain misleading information that can contaminate a person's memory. We get contaminated when we talk to other witnesses, when we're interrogated in a suggestive or leading manner. We get contaminated if we've seen a high publicity event and then we see some newspaper or television coverage about that event. All of these situations provide an opportunity for new information to enter a witness's memory and cause a contamination, transformation, distortion, or even just a supplementation of the memory. So what the scientific work on memory distortion is revealing about the nature of memory is that it is malleable. It's not something that's fixed. It's subject to distortion or change or exaggeration, and that's why we talk about the malleable nature of memory.
That concludes part 1 of False Confessions. Tune in next week for part 2, where we go into more exact interrogation techniques, types of interrogations banned in some countries that lead to a lot of false confessions, and we try and bring a conclusion to this topic of what do we do about people falsely confessing to things they haven't done. Playing us out this episode, we have Vernon Dalhart, all the way back from 1925 with his song, The Prisoner's Song. Enjoy, and see you in the after show. So I just thought I'd give all you lovely people an update on how OVPOD is doing technology-wise. I think I told you that we purchased a new editing computer and it is sitting on my desk and working wonderfully, and you guys have probably already heard the first couple episodes that have been edited by this computer. And it's allowing me to do things faster, so I'm going to get back on schedule in no time here, which is great to pump content out to you guys and Patreon content and all that good stuff. But we're still trugging along. We're still looking forward to see what can be updated next, and the next thing we have our eyes on is microphones. and we're planning on buying some new microphones because we're still rocking the same $30 Amazon 3-pack mics that we have since the start. So maybe in the future, with the continued support of our patrons, we'll be able to save enough money to get us some new sound equipment. And also just the monthly upkeep costs to pay the bills, keep this ship a-chugging. We appreciate every bit of it. That's it for this week. See you in part 2 of False Confessions next week. I love you very much. Stay out of the heat if you don't have to be in it. It can overwhelm one quickly. Have a wonderful, hot as fuck summer.